Well, there was certainly no sleeping at the USAC Cellular One Midget Grand Prix Series in early 1988. Let's take a look back and see what happened.
Round one of the Cellular One Grand Prix was held at Sullivan Arena in Fresno, California. Billy Vukovich III honed his short track skills in the Gerhardt Pontiac-powered Midget. The legend, Johnny Parsons Jr., looked eager to test his Cellular One Midget on the syrup-treated concrete. The reigning Western States champion was not satisfied with his early qualifying. And then there were the Young Lions, eager to start the '88 season. Driving the number 96 car would be the talented, beautiful Denise Bennett. The initial trophy dash of the Cellular One Indoor Series started four of the most popular drivers around. Jumping into the early lead was Rusty Rasmussen, followed by Johnny Parsons Jr., with Ron Tripp settling into third. Tripp, driving the Zerunian Cosworth, is a threat from any position. The third is not his favorite. Johnny Parsons Jr. had the honor of driving the series sponsors Midget. The Indiana racer had no intention of letting them down. It would be Rusty Rasmussen in front of his hometown crowd winning the first trophy dash of the USAC season. The heat races were most exciting. Anthony Simonian, the number 49 car, took the first trip through the infield. Parsons and newcomer Darrell Haw from Fresno, California, tangled in turn two. On the final lap, Steve Lewis, Parsons, and Haw were first, second, and third, and it would be Steve Lewis from Bakersfield, California, hanging on for the win. Billy Vukovich III was the winner of heat race number 2. In the next heat race, we had more action. 4 midgets checked out the west wall, while another checked out the east wall. It was Tripp on the pole for the semi-main at the green flag, and the green would not last long. Anthony Simoni helped another driver find the infield. And not more than a lap later, there was another skirt. The main event. In the 50-lap feature, Johnny Parsons Jr. took the early lead with a great shot off turn 4 at the green. While the rest of the pack battled for position, Parsons pulled away but soon hit traffic. The Fresno crowd, known as Great Midget Fans, were on their feet cheering for their favorite driver. Parsons worked well through traffic, but not everyone had the same success. Running third was black flag for leaking fluids. It was the man who worked well all day, Johnny P., winning the first round of the Cellular One Grand Prix. Round number 2 in the Arco Arena in Sacramento, California, had Tripp showing the other drivers how to get around the tiny indoor track. In the trophy dash, the familiar number 1 of Johnny Parsons Jr. and Ron Tripp lined up in the front row. Sleepy and Parsons spun going into turn 1. After the restart, Parsons got to the checkered flag first. We can leave it up to race promoter J.L. Quinn to have the prettiest trophy girls. Parsons received his trophy from Bertha, the Nugget Casino hostess, and took the scariest ride of the year. The heat races proved to be as exciting as ever with great racing action. But on the tiny indoor tracks, it could get a little rough. Occasionally, it doesn't even require much help to get turned around. In the second heat race, Billy Vukovich III did not have the day he intended to have, making contact with one midget and a lot of tires. This definitely got the action started. Several laps later, Mookie, on his way to the front, hit more tires and more midgets. And as if that wasn't enough, he had to get hooked up with Chuck Westman, the number 36 car. Maybe Pookie thought he needed a teammate. In the next heat was Steve Lewis and Darrell Haw making contact in turn 2. Lewis would be done for this evening. After the restart, the number 14 Mario Branghetto aboard took the checker. The USAC Cellular One Grand Prix feature at Arco Arena would be exciting for the packed house. When the green flag dropped, there was trouble immediately in turn one. Johnny P had the injectors knocked off the engine of his racer and ended his night early. When racing continued, Sleepy Trip took the lead from the number 22 car and never looked back. As the laps continued, the number 14 Mario Branghetto took the ever-popular side trip through the tire jungle, but continued only to make contact with the number 14X. Lukey 3, trying to salvage the rest of the evening, had yet more bad luck. Survived an earlier heat race incident and wound up with a strong second-place finish. The feature winner at Arco Arena was Ron Sleepy Tripp of Costa Mesa, California. The USAC Western States Midget champion had finally gotten back on the winning track. Round 3 was held in Reno, Nevada, and the Midgets were the perfect accent to the nightlife. The fans packed the house for this final round of the Cellular One Grand Prix USAC Midget Series. All the drivers tried to make this one, hoping to win the race and catch some of that exciting Reno hospitality. USAC pushed off the trophy dash, and once again, the fans were not disappointed. The dash started Johnny P., Sleepy Trip, P.J. Jones, and Rusty Rasmussen. The track was not the usual syrup-treated concrete, but old-fashioned dirt. At the green flag, Parsons came from the pole and took the lead, with Tripp second, Jones third, and Rasmussen fourth. Parsons began to pull away, leaving the battle for second to Tripp, Jones, and Rasmussen. The boys put on a great display of driving throughout the 4 laps. PJ's Midget was set up like he wanted. He tried several times to pass Tripp in the turns. Rasmussen refused to be left behind, making the race for second even more exciting. On the final lap, Parsons had control while P.J. Jones tried to make yet another pass on Tripp, with Rusty still in fourth. The checkered flag dropped. Once again, Johnny Parsons Jr. would cross the finish line first, marking yet another victory for the man known as the Legend. The heats were once again as exciting as the past 2 events. USAC, J.L. Quinn, and the sponsors are to be congratulated for a super series. P.J. Jones, Tommy Astone, and Wally Pancratz were the drivers making the moves in the first heat. And it was a mad scramble to the finish, but did not go unnoticed by the packed house. In the second heat, the track seemed to get a little narrow in turns 1 and 2 and resulted in what resembled a parking lot with no parking lines. At the restart, the track widened out for the drivers, but one did not make it through on the outside and spun with no damage to the car.
We are green on this one. Davidson in the lead, the 59. We've got...
In the next few laps, Wayne Bennett checked the construction of his roll cage, but was able to continue. Unfortunately, Wayne and his wife Denise seemed to have a difference of opinion, and Denise decided it was time for her and her husband to have a chat about it, forgetting that they were racing at the time. Just before the main lined up, most of the drivers changed chassis setups because of the rough and dry track conditions. Young P.J. Jones, sitting on the pole, took the early lead. Tripp dropped into second as the rest of the pack worked for position. One driver thought it might be fun to chase officials around the track infield.
And it is turn number 2.
Sleepy Tripp had visions of taking yet another victory in the indoor series, but Jones still had the lead. The two would continue the first and second battle for the next several laps. Darrell Hall and Johnny P. worked their way through clouds of dust, and the crowd had the same problems. Tripp set up a pass on Jones going into the back straightaway, but unfortunately, the two made contact. To further complicate matters, Tommy Astone ducked under Jones trying to follow Tripp through and also made contact with a 21A. Darrell Hall was another victim of the turn 3 incident and sustained a flat right rear tire. As the race continued, Tripp kept the lead, and Rusty Rasmussen drove into second with the number 60 Hart in third. The two racers fought for several laps while Jones charged back up to fourth place. All eyes were glued on the second and third place drivers as the two engaged in typical indoor racing by rearranging the plating on the Nerf bars. The number 60 car finally found the opening that he needed to make the pass for second. Rasmussen bounced to the outside, and as he started to spin, he was corrected by Jones coming up from behind. As the race continued, Jones made the pass on the 60 car and claimed second. As the dust settled, Ron Sleepy Tripp in the Zerunian car out of Visalia was the victor and sat in the winner's circle once again.